Listen very carefully and follow my instructions. Prepare your brain for the Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast.
I gotta tell you, being an entrepreneur, I will not go through the rest of my career without taking nootropics. Aniracetam, piracetam, modafinil, Nupet, uridine monophosphate. I mean, phenylpiracetam, forget it. You can always have a better brain.
The Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast is about to begin.
Episode number 84 of the Cortex Labs Nootropics podcast. I am your host, Ryan Michael Ballo. Thanks so much for listening. Going to go through a reader question today on the dangers of nootropics or the potential side effects of nootropics. That a user run into some issues with certain nootropics. We'll explain why, particularly racetams and a few other very stimulating compounds like L-tyrosine and phenylalanine. Kind of want to just talk about that to keep folks aware of what's out there in terms of side effects. And I don't like to use the word dangers when it comes to nootropics, but just sort of how to pace them wisely, how to take them smartly and intelligently, because at Cortex Labs and throughout the course of our content, you'll see that the major theme is using nootropics surgically and using nootropics wisely, which means using nootropics safely. Let's get the specials out of the way. We got some specials on product. Whoops, sorry. What is that? Okay, that's my PlayStation. Okay, PlayStation popping in. We got specials on products coming in over the course of the next week while you're listening to this. Here they are. Number one, the Cortex Nootropic Stack R Nootropic Stack, pre-made stack, powerful pre-made stack, on sale right now for $28. Think about this for a second. Just think and listen. $28, right? That's like a meal out, a cheap meal out. That's like a BYOB Mexican meal, right? Like by yourself or something. You instead can get a bottle of what's being called the only pre-made nootropic stack that works. $28 gets you a lot of flow, a lot of focus, a lot of mental energy, and a lot of verbal fluency, and a lot of a good, productive, motivated nootropic experience. All you have to do is go to livecortex.com, add a bottle of the Cortex Nootropic Stack to your cart, and then use the coupon code 5, F-I-V-E. That'll take the money off to make it $28. Livecortex.com for the Cortex Nootropic Stack. I think you'll love it. If you need my help personally, we have a consulting service. It's a 40-minute call with me on nootropics. People just drill me with questions most of the time or have me help them figure out stacks that work best for them. That's on sale also. If you use the coupon code 5, takes it down to $74 at livecortex.com. And then if you're new to nootropics, we wrote a book for you. It's called Smarter, Better, Faster. It's a digital downloadable book that teaches you everything about nootropics, gives you my favorite stacks, gives you my strategy on how to actually use nootropics and get the best effects. If you use the coupon code 5, F-I-V-E, that'll get you Smarter, Better, Faster for $19. I mean, think about that. Boom. Best book in the world on nootropics, $19. Okay. So we're going to discuss, well, let me just say this. The user that sent the email in to us asking about dangers and side effects was running into some side effects with phenylpiracetam, adrafinil, tyrosine, phenylalanine, and theacrine. Okay, the common theme, if you as you might be thinking across all of these nootropic compounds, is that all of them are stimulants. Okay, theacrine is like a caffeine analog that is pretty stimulatory. I mean, you take it in 100 to 200 milligram quantities, and within 20-30 minutes, it's sooner for a lot of folks, you feel quite productive and quite stimulated. It's one of those nootropics that I've always said, and I continue to be flabbergasted. I hate that word. I'm flabbergasted at the notion of people not knowing about it or it being underrated. It's very underrated. So theacrine is a very stimulatory nootropic compound. Phenylpiracetam, equally stimulatory. Okay, it's a racetam that really cranks up brain energy and focus. So it's very stimulatory. Adrafinil, as some of you know, those of you that don't, it's basically the legal version of a prescription compound called modafinil. And adrafinil really turns on brain energy. It turns on the capacity to sit and do work for long periods of time. It's really, how do you say it? I mean, basically, to put it simply, it really does kind of crank up the nervous system and wakefulness, but in a way that's not stimulant-like, but that's also very profound. Okay, so adrafinil is another stimulant. Now, tyrosine turns up a couple neurotransmitters that are responsible for your fight or flight system, right? So not like you would take it and be in fight or flight mode necessarily. Most of the time, it's manageable. People take it, but they're very alert. They're very brain is turned on. It just kind of gives them energy to go and do stuff. Phenylalanine is basically the same way. I mean, it's like 1 or 2 steps away in the metabolic process from tyrosine. So it's pretty similar in many ways. Builds the neurotransmitter dopamine as well in the brain, but also very stimulant-like. Now, if you combine any of these, by the way, kind of just as an aside, if you combine like 100 milligrams phenylparastam, 50 milligrams theacrine, 200 milligrams tyrosine, if you dose them that way, which is kind of medium dosing them and sort of low dosing, some of them like tyrosine at 200, you will get a combined stimulant effect, a pretty strong nootropic benefit. But I would say, to be wise, you would be not so wise to combine them all in regular doses. So you wouldn't want to do like 175 milligrams phenylparastam, 500 milligrams tyrosine, 200 milligrams theacrine, like 500 milligrams phenylalanine. You wouldn't want to, and like 300 milligrams of Drafenol. That would probably land you in a place where you're way too stimulated and you don't have a good experience. And that's kind of one of the things that folks have to watch out for and kind of just be careful of when they take nootropics. Okay, so those were the compounds that folks were running into. This particular person was running into issues with, and looking at his doses, like we got down to the doses, he was high dosing all of them. He was essentially dosing them at the highest quantities that they should be dosed. And in some cases, he was taking some of them together. And so that's really the issue. And the side effects particularly were, one of the times when he took a Drafenol and phenylparastam, which is something I'm not sure I have ever put together, or I guess would suggest putting together, again, unless you dose them very small. He took, those two together in significantly high doses, and he basically couldn't sleep for like a day and a half, and he felt overly agitated and kind of PO'd. He couldn't get any work done because the level of focus, like the flow state, it's sort of like the perfect place, right? You can't be too stimulated and you can't be understimulated. It kind of has to be perfect. And so when you pull the lever on any of these compounds past the allowable state, like or the flow state, like a good even balance dose wise of these nootropic compounds, then you are going to run into, right, or it opens up the possibility to run to overstimulation, agitation, teeth grinding, not being able to sleep, in extreme cases, kind of just being angry, super angry. Like, I've heard like funny stories of people taking certain nootropic compounds and like, dude, I was just angry the whole time. I didn't even want to get work done. I was kind of just like mad at everybody. And I'm at the store walking around and people were walking slow in front of me and I'm like wanting to push them out of my way. And I just like could not take it, like road rage, the whole nine, right? So you don't want to go over on a lot of this stuff. Then of course, when you're talking about stimulating compounds, to include caffeine, I mean, the idea of getting racing heart, like having your heart racing and having it, you generally feel like your nervous system is overtaxed and you're sort of just in this mode where you're just like, you're way too stimulated. What that normally ends up is like a crash mode. I mean, that's where people do crash, because you can absolutely crash on certain nootropic compounds, probably because like they've taxed these glands that sit above the kidneys that are responsible for a whole bunch of things like fluid balance or producing hormones that have to do with fluid balance, called the adrenal glands. And when you tax them with overstimulation, you're bound to have fatigue thereafter. It's a pretty common thing. In fact, there's people that believe, I'm one of them, that chronic fatigue syndrome, in some variations, because I think there's a bunch of different things that causes chronic fatigue syndrome. And we have a consulting service on that, by the way, for those of you that have CFS or have dealt with it. We know how to help folks out of it. That is, in my opinion, caused in some cases by overtaxing the adrenal glands so consistently that they burn out. The adrenal cortex burns out. They can't sufficiently provide or produce the hormones that you need them to produce, and they also have a lot to do with energy production, okay? So, I mean, kind of shifting gears a little bit, like if you look at compounds like racetams, the one known thing among people that have been taking nootropics for long enough is that cholinergic facilitating nootropics, that is like nootropic compounds that increase the quantity of a particular neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, or they just sensitize receptors, brain receptors, neurotransmitter receptors to the signal of acetylcholine. They tend to do some similar things. They'll make you agitated, overstimulated. In some cases, if you take cholinergic nootropic compounds, too far, basically, and too high of doses, then they could make you have the reverse of what you're trying to shoot for with nootropics. They could give you brain fog. Okay, and nobody wants that, especially when your aim to take nootropics is to have better brain performance. You take particular nootropic compounds and they give you worse performance. And that's when it comes to racetams and when it comes to cholinergic nootropic compounds, Alcar, uridine to some extent, CDP choline, alpha GPC, all of the major racetams, and Noopept, which is like the basis of one of our podcasts that we did recently, which we proved through some research that Noopept actually stimulates the release of acetylcholine. I guess it's like it's the signaling of acetylcholine to a receptor site. It actually makes the signal so much stronger. It's called cholinosensitizing. When you have that, and it's to an extent that's above like where your brain kind of wants to be in homeostasis or its regular balanced mode, then you're bound to cause some of these effects. And in some cases, like you have memory loss. You just have it's nothing serious or crazy. You just have like some sort of short-term memory issues. Like it'll be hard for you to kind of hold things in your head. Just like, okay, I need to chill out for 2 hours, go to sleep, take a nap, wake up, everything will be good. It has to wear off because you've put at that point too much of that cholinosensitizing effect into the brain, and it does not know how to handle it. If you drink 10 cups of coffee in 2 hours, your nervous system does not know how to handle it. Okay, so back to the stimulants, you got to remember. I think when folks get into nootropics, they're sort of thinking like, all right, here's these 5 nootropic compounds: phenylpiracetam, adrafenil, tyrosine, phenylalanine, theacrine. All right, they're all well regarded as like powerful nootropics, and people talk about them within the community. Why not put them all together? That'll give me the best bang for my buck. Not always the case. Again, if you do that, you've really got to low dose everything, and then in that case, you would get a pretty powerful effect. But taking that many nootropics in general, one of the rules of thumb is to take a B complex with them so that you can balance out basically neurotransmission, brain chemical function, because that's what B vitamins do while you're taking that stuff. But it isn't particularly wise to just throw down a whole bunch of stimulant nootropics or stimulating nootropics at once unless you're doing it surgically, as is the case of taking the stuff in low doses, okay? Talking about the idea of, taking nootropics longer term and them having long-term detrimental effects, that only seems to be the case. And I can't even say that, long-term detrimental effects is the case. Basically just consistent side effects with consistent use that's dose dependent. So if you stop taking them, the side effects, go away. That seems to be the case with younger folks that are overdosing on nootropics or just taking too much quantity of a particular compounds, like in the case of this user. And they don't look, when it comes down to optimizing the brain and neurotransmitter profile, if you don't need it, your body's going to reject it. And the way it rejects it is not by not having you feel anything, it's by giving you side effects. Okay, so that's like something that tends to happen in younger people who are taking too much of particular nootropic compounds that don't need the optimization to those regions of their brain or those neurotransmitters or those neurotransmitter receptor sites. And that can be the case. Some people might not need like oxiracetam or aniracetam to speed up acetylcholine signaling or release in those cases from the hippocampus. That's like one of their mechanisms. Folks may not need that. They have enough. That whole system works super great. And they would be better fussing with like maybe some Alcar, which is mildly cholinergic, mildly increases acetylcholine concentrations by basically a metabolic process which captures part of the chemical structure of Alcar and donates it to the production of acetylcholine in the brain, but it's such to a lesser extent that it's not substantial. So Alcar and maybe like low-dose theacrine, which is kind of like caffeine, and then it's stimulant-like, but it's also, I believe, dopamine. It has some mechanism that facilitates the signaling of dopamine in the brain. And that might be better for someone who just can't tolerate racetams, because there are some people that are like that. Now, conversely, there are people who are 70 years old, have been taking nootropics for 20 years, And because their brains have aged, they can tolerate nootropics no problem. And they can tolerate cholinergic nootropics, dopamine-centric nootropics, serotonin-centric nootropics, GABA-centric or modifying nootropics, and you still have problems because they need the optimization. They can tolerate the racetams. They can tolerate the higher doses. They can tolerate not cycling the stuff. I talk to 7-year-olds. I mean, this is legit because we do all this consulting on nootropics with people all around the world. I talk to 7-year-olds who can just take nootropics like it's nobody's business. And all they do is say, man, I feel like I'm 40 again, or 38 again, 35 again, 22 again. I crush people in bingo. When we're playing bingo with old folks, I crush them. They have the competitive, nootropics will give you the competitive advantage in bingo. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. I hope that's my take on it. I like to sort of be responsible about the usage of nootropics. I don't think they're entirely innocuous. It's all situationally dependent, and so I hope that's kind of made the whole picture a little more clear for folks that are wondering about it. I mean, there's always a reason if you're getting some sort of side effect from a nootropic compound. And probably the best thing to do segueing into product is, look, you got to read Smarter, Better, Faster. That's our book that teaches you everything you need to know about this stuff so that you can go into nootropics and take them surgically and wisely so that you really can get good effects. I mean, that's what folks want. They just want to have positive effects, want to have a smooth nootropic experience. The Cortex stack right now, guys, our nootropic stack, which was made to be super balanced, but it's very potent in the eyes of our users. I mean, it's a strong stack. We made it to be strong. Buy a bottle of the Cortex stack right now. Just go to livecortex.com. Even while we're sitting here, right on this podcast, I ain't afraid to ask. We sell great product, and it is awesome. Folks love the Cortex stack. Livecortex.com. Add a bottle to your cart. Enter the coupon code 5, spelled out FIVE. That'll save you $5 on the mighty Cortex nootropic stack. Takes it down to $28. Pretty cheap for a great stack. And if you need my help personally, we mentioned the consulting service. We have a 40-minute call with me. That's the consulting service. 15 additional email correspondences. And mostly, again, people kind of drill me with questions the whole time. Is this good for me? Is that good for me? Why did I run into problems with this nootropic and other people don't? Or why am I not responding to this? Or can you help me formulate a stack for medical school? We basically do everything on that consult. Buy that at livecortex.com. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. Talk to you next time. Rock on.